Hi, welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. Elizabeth and I used to be in a comedy improv group together back when we were 19, and then we lost touch.
A few years ago, we found each other and discovered we're both painters,
Performers,
animal lovers,
and Pilates teachers.
and naturalists.
Elizabeth, I'm not a naturalist,
Oh,
but I love nature.
well, that counts. The point is, we're
We're long
lost
friends,
friends.
and we're both award-winning fiction writers.
After one of my stories appeared in MetaStellar, we started the show.
So MetaStellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online speculative, I'm having trouble saying speculative today, but speculative fiction magazine. And we publish original horror, science fiction, and fantasy. There's a link below. You can check us out.
Today, we are so excited to have Nick Olson joining us.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about Nick. Nick is an author of the novels Here's Waldo and The Brothers We Share, and is the editor-in-chief of Macro Mike. His third novel, Afterglow, is out this June 2022. He's also a Best Small Fictions nominee, a finalist for Glimmer Train's Very Short Fiction Award, and a 2021 Wig Leaf Longlister. In and from Chicagoland, Nick's been published in Smoke Long Quarterly, Hobart, Fiction Southeast, and many other fine places. So welcome, Nick.
Welcome back. We're happy to be talking again with Nick Olson, and show us your pets.
This is Philip.
Oh,
He's the sweetest little boy.
oh,
How
you
old
are
is Philip?
cute.
He is 6 now. Yeah.
I love orange tabby cats.
He
They are
is. He thinks he's about this big. He is the biggest cat that we have, but he does not know that.
I have a white cat that is has orange, he's cut orange flame, it's called. He's got
Yeah.
like markings like a Siamese, and they are apparently a mix with a tabby. That's how they get their coloring. And he's the sweetest thing. And huge too.
Right.
So we're so happy. I'm going to go right into. We're so happy to have Nick back with us, and today we're going to talk with him about reading, writing, and submitting flash fiction, because it's something he's done a lot of. So let's chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tips.
So it's Flash. It was kind of like my way. I talked about this before, but it was kind of like my way into fiction. It was a really kind of like non-committal way to figure out what just the structure was all about. And then somewhere along the way, I realized that actually Flash is entirely different than trying to do something like a novel, and the rules are totally different. And I'm not going to say, writing Flash is necessarily harder than a novel, but there are some difficulties like inherent in Flash that you just don't really have, or you don't have the same kind of challenges when you're writing a novel. And so it helped inform a lot too, of just being super economical with your words. And so also coming from like a screenwriting background, that I think that's also why I gravitated toward it, because with screenplays, it's all about kind of like condense, get in, get out, start the scene late, end the scene early. And so it felt natural to me to just dive into, in a way, I would almost say like the fiction version of that. But yeah, I've worked with a few mags. I read and edited for Cease Cows, and then also the Citron Review. And now I run my own mag, Macro Mike, that I've been doing since 2018. Wow. Yeah, it's been a while.
So what is the word length that Macro Mike takes for submission?
1,000 words or less.
Okay.
And it's basically just Flash or creative nonfiction. I intentionally kept the guidelines really basic because I didn't want to be super strict or kind of limit folks. I pretty much just say that we try to publish like worlds in words and things that tell a macro story in a micro word count. And one of the, I guess that kind of leads me into one of my tips is I kind of always have one of my old writing professors in my ear, Sue Mraz over at Columbia College Chicago. She's amazing. And the thing that always really, there were a lot of lessons from her that stuck, but one of the big ones was write to express, not impress. And that's one, it's something I always try to take to heart, but two, that's, I think, something that is important to keep in mind when you're submitting, but also just crafting something. Where is this coming from? Another one was why this specific story, and why are you telling it, and why now? And so, I mean, some of the times that's really literal with, like, we get a lot of creative nonfiction. And so that those questions are answered pretty, like, clearly. But even with Flash too, like, even with something that's not maybe factually true, if there's still that emotional truth to it, I can always tell when I'm reading a sub and it's making me come alive. And I can tell that this writer put everything they had into it. And that's the whole ball game. That's what I do it for. That's why I read and why I edit. And that's, I guess, kind of what I look for.
So what do you think are some of the common, I'm going to call it mistakes, but missteps that writers do when they're writing fiction that you see kind of repetitively, I guess?
Yeah, I think I try to think of it like holistically. So like a lot of my tips have to do with reading and writing and submitting, because I think they kind of all just are combined, and they should be combined. But there are some things where, like I said, with get in late and leave early, I think that's a pretty common one, where, you can a lot of the time kind of afford to cut a lot of those character introductions, or kind of like the first 200, 300 words even can sometimes be preamble that once you cut that, it really kind of puts you into the action. And so, you'll have plenty of time to kind of fully explore something in the contents, in the context, I should say, of a novel, but you simply don't have that time in Flash, and especially in micro. We publish a lot of micro too. And so that, so I'd say, is just kind of getting into the scene as late as you can, and leaving as early as you can, to just find the crux of this story and these characters. And you don't have to answer all these questions. Like, I'm looking for something that's communicating theme in some way. I'm looking for maybe a hook or a question that I really want to see the answer of. And you don't necessarily have to, set up these Chekhov's guns and then fire every one of them, but I want to have some of that. And so that's also why I'm really open to different form and format. Like, we've published like hermit crab essays. We've done stuff like in the form of like an FAQ, one that was like kind of more of like a quiz. It was like a therapy quiz. And so I'm really open to form and format and experimentation, as long as it's for a purpose. I think I can always, like, I love language and vocabulary and someone painting a picture, but it always needs to be in service to character first and foremost, and then to plot second, I would say. That's just kind of my tastes.
Yeah, the micro world is just exploding, and the Flash fiction. But I mean, the micro, sometimes it's so out there. I mean, it's really, really different kind of writing.
Right.
And sometimes I connect to it, and sometimes I don't, which I think is fine. It's almost poetic, a lot of it, because of needing to take the really specific words and being really like little gemstones each word. And a lot of it doesn't have at all, to me, a traditional trajectory of storytelling.
Yeah.
And really
that kind of leads into another kind of tip or concept, I would say, is for me especially, like, I was a fan of these magazines first and the submitters second. And so that's something I would really recommend, is just read widely and read a bunch of stuff, especially stuff that you wouldn't normally do yourself. Because it can be easy, I think, to kind of start to feel insulated if you're just kind of reading in kind of like a certain niche or like you're getting kind of in your comfort zone. Some of the most important stuff that I did early on was just trying to read as many of these mags as possible, which was another tip I have is also if you find a writer that, you know, their work is just kind of firing on all cylinders and you're a huge fan, just kind of leapfrog from their bios. This was something that I did when I was just starting out. I would find these writers where I was just like, how are they even doing this? And I just wanted to kind of study and again, like be a fan and be a student. And so I think author bios are great for that. There were so many times where I would just kind of go down a rabbit hole of like, oh, they said they, you know, had this thing in Smoke Long. Let me go read that thing in Smoke Long, and then kind of find a different story from a different writer in that issue and do the same thing. And another tip that I've got too that has really helped me, because it's important to never be kind of finished or never kind of feel like you're complete with a piece, or at least working it into a place where you think that this is done or this is ready. But at the same time, so much of submitting and publishing is just a numbers game. And I know that that's something that a lot of writers don't want to hear. They think it's kind of like a cop-out answer. But now that I've worked a few mags and run my own, that really is what it is. Like at Macro Mike, we only publish one story a week, every Friday. So just by the nature of how many subs I get and how many I can fit in to a year, I have to reject a lot of incredible work. And very often I'll have to send 30 no's to get to one yes. And I try to having to reject that much great work, I try to make it a little bit more pleasant. And so a lot of the time because again, I'm a huge fan of a lot of these mags, I'll offer suggestions of like, I love your work and I want to read more of you. Try this mag with this one, or
that's really nice.
Yeah,
that's
because
really nice.
it should be about community. But that was the point I wanted to make. Is I've got what I call like the Hydra method, where if I've got a piece where I'm pretty sure this is ready, it's kind of a numbers game piece and not like a retool it and start from scratch kind of piece. If I get one rejection, I'll go ahead and send that same piece out to 3 other magazines. So that's just operating from like a pure number standpoint of like, I'm pretty sure this piece is ready. I got this rejection. Let me send it out to 2 or 3 other places. Because really at the end of the day, it's you can't teach that diligence and just sticking with it. I think that's part of it too, because you're not going to have somebody kind of over your shoulder making sure the pages get done, but also making sure you keep sending out work. And it can be really hard and discouraging, especially the more kind of rejections pile up. But I mean, I get rejected all the time, and the only thing that's changed is my experience and my perspective. It was really disheartening at first, and now I'm just like, all right, cool. Let me go send it out to a couple places.
And I wanted
Exactly.
to
I've had things that I didn't sell for years, and I even sort of forgot about, and then I was like, I really like the story. I'll send it out again, and suddenly, it's accepted or even nominated for something, and it's like,
right. You really never
whatever.
It's right place, right time. That's all. I mean, a lot of it, if it's ready. I wanted to ask you, Nick, you were talking about going to an author's bio or their page and reading other pieces of their work. And for myself, I kind of write all over the board. Like I write literary stuff, I write, speculative stuff. And I think you do too.
Yeah.
And I wonder, because I think the world's changing and we have more, people are more accepting of that. But I always worry that, you're going to be like, people love your speculative fiction. And then they come in and they read something that's like this really, kitchen sink kind of drama. And they're like, oh, that's not, so how do you feel about all that?
You are completely describing like what I've been actively going through lately. I've gotten more of a handle on it, but that was my thought process going in, because like with Here's Waldo and The Brother We Share, it was very much literary realism. The first book was like a coming of age thing. The second one was a little bit more experimental in places, but I was dealing with like mental health struggles and trauma and recoveries and stuff like that. But yeah, there was no speculative stuff in there. And so I was really worried when I started this, because I was like, I know I love the genre. I know I eat, sleep, and breathe speculative fiction and like classic sci-fi. I love it. And I've always wanted to do it, but I don't know if I can pull it off, one. And two, I don't know if people are gonna like it. And one of the things that surprised me was that both of those things like ended up working out. Like I talked before about how I would send out pieces that were like offshoots or like excerpts from the first two books while I was writing them. And I did that with Afterglow as well. And out of the three books, Afterglow actually saw the most pubs of like pieces that were offshoots from it, even more than the other two. So I went in really worried that it wouldn't land, or people wouldn't like it, or people who read my literary realism stuff wouldn't care for it. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I think that things are shifting, and it's really cool to see that not only is there more of like acceptance and people respecting the genre, but there's also a lot more kind of slipstream stuff coming out, where you can have stuff that has maybe some of like the genre conventions of like, just kind of this standard, like a literary coming of age, but then you kind of toss in some of these more like speculative elements, and it's really cool, and it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm just excited to see what happens from here.
And I think, just for the three of us sitting here, we all read all over the board. I mean, it's not like, I think there are people who are only like a specific, and they're going to genre or whatever, and they're going to steer clear. But I think readers are readers. And if it's a good story, a lot of them will read across all genres.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really limiting to just be like, well, I'm only going to, like, this isn't real art, or like, a lot of what inspired me, like even with Afterglow, were like CRPGs, like computer role-playing games from like the 90s, like Fallout 1 and 2. These are video games, but they have the writing of media that I've experienced in a while. And I think it's important to just kind of broaden your horizons and not limit yourself as a reader, but also not limit a genre, because any genre is valid, and I think capable of being like a vehicle of meaningful communication. It's just, the genre conventions might be different, the overall structure, but yeah, that was something that, coming from a screenwriting background, like I wrote sci-fi stuff, I wrote Western, I wrote, like all dark comedy, I wrote all sorts of different genres. The genre didn't really matter to me. It was more about, who are these characters? Who are these people? How am I going to invest in them? What's the plot? And genre just kind of, it's secondary. Yeah, it's more about how good of a story is this, and why am I invested?
And for people watching this who haven't seen the other episode with Nick, we do talk about his new novel, Afterglow, which comes out June 2022. And also, if you're interested in it, there's a link below for you to order a copy, either from Nick directly or later on. There you go, there it is, from Amazon or other venues after it comes out. So you can check that out below the YouTube channel. But what other, did you have more? We kind of diverted. Did you have more tips that you wanted to offer, or was that kind of the gist?
That was kind of the gist of it. Yeah, I just had these kind of 5 quick tips, because I think it's I'm not as kind of like restrictive or prescriptive tips. I think and again, that's why I keep sub guidelines really open and kind of like open to interpretation, because I think it's more about exploration and just figuring out the story. And the second that someone is saying you must do this or you have to do this, there are so many examples. There's so many examples of people who break those rules and still do it. Like I don't think people have to write every day, for example. I think it's important to stick with projects and see them through, but you can create a structure and a schedule that works for you. Like with Afterglow, I only was really writing at first 1 day a week, and then 2 days a week. I would just kind of knock out one story in 1 day. And Here's Waldo, I wrote every weekday, but I took the weekends off. And then with The Brother We Share, I wrote literally every day until I finished the first draft. But a lot of this kind of prescriptive stuff, it's really limiting, and there is no one size fits all solution to
I
writing.
love hearing you say that,
I know.
because
So good.
there are so many people, you have to write 1,000 words a day,
Yeah.
or you're not a writer, and you have to submit, or you're not a writer, and it's like, okay, so I'm not a writer or whatever. I mean, it's just like, so this,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's not inducive to creativity, I think. I mean, it can
No.
be great to be in a place where you're writing a lot every day, and that's fine, and you can even pay attention to it, but you have to be able to, change this up. And there's so many people who's like, this is it, this is what you have to do. And if
Right.
you're not doing it, you're doing it wrong.
Exactly. And like, don't get me wrong, I understand there's a business component to it. And there's, being an author and having to market is different than just being a writer. And it's a very different skill set. It's a very different kind of like approach. But at the end of the day, we're creating entire worlds out of thin air. We're creating characters who never lived and breathed, but who, if we did our job right, feel like they did and feel like they do. We're doing a magic thing. And if we're losing touch of the magic, it kind of, like, that's the whole point, is just being lost in the magic of it. Like when I was writing Afterglow, I basically felt like I was a kid again. I just wrote the way I used to when I was a little kid. The only difference was, I've got a few more years of experience. But it's that.
And I think people lose track of the fact that, writing isn't only just sitting down and plunking your fingers on the keys. A lot of it is going on when you're taking a shower or doing the dishes or taking a walk. If you're processing, sometimes you're not even thinking about it, but you're processing. And sometimes you're thinking actively about the story or the character and figuring things out. So a lot of it's done away from your keyboard.
Exactly. I'm doing that with, I've got an idea of what I want my next book to be, but I haven't written down on paper a single word of it. And exactly like you're saying, when I'm, going grocery shopping or taking a shower or we're right over by Lake Michigan. So I like to take a lot of lake walks. So much of the actual work is in moments like that. Yeah. The actual sitting down to write it is more of kind of like, it's just a almost like a mechanical process. I completely agree with you. I think most of the actual writing and generative work comes from living our lives and allowing our subconscious to kind of piece together what the thing is.
Yeah, and giving yourself the time to do that, I think I find, for me at least, I'm only giving myself the permission to like not write all the time and stuff, and just say, I have this idea that's germinating my head. I have the world building going on. I don't know what the story's yet, and it'll come to me eventually. Or I'll make somebody else tell me a story that works and fit it in.
I guess it's a lot of trust. It's a lot of trust in yourself, right? Which is also what you were talking about with submission. It's a lot of trust that, and I would say that I've had similar experience where I'm much more accepting of the fact that I'm going to have a lot of rejections, and really work to not take it personally, really work to go, okay, so that wasn't the right fit. Let's move on to the next and the next. And it can get frustrating at times, but again, I realize it's not about me and it's not about the work if I think it's ready. Sometimes you can go back and rework a piece if it's getting no traction, but a lot of times it's better just to move on to the next piece.
Yeah,
just keep plugging away on the new stuff.
Especially if you're going to get into performing, painting, writing, any of the things we've done.
All the other stuff we do. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I did when Waldo was coming up. I started working on Brother We Share. Same with Afterglow. I started working on that around the time the Brother We Share was going to be coming out. And to go back to what you were saying, like, I feel like so much of it is so much objection is it just, there's so much other really good work, and just it's a numbers game. or it might not be a fit for this magazine, but it could be an excellent fit for this other one. There have been several times where, as an editor, and this is like one of the most rewarding things as an editor, is when I send a rejection and I'm like, send me more work. This is good. It's just not a fit for us, but try out this place. And I've gotten people right back to me in like a month or two, and like, oh, by the way, that place you suggested, they accepted it. And it's super gratifying.
That is, but I want to ask you a question, and you can only speak for yourself, I understand.
Yeah.
But, as an editor, if, we're always told not to treat you like humans and to never correspond with you. So are you saying that someone can write you and say thank you for something and you're not like, oh,
yeah, that's a really good point. I can only speak for myself, but I love stuff like that. And I might not kind of get in like a big thing of correspondence, but I mean, there have been plenty of times where folks I've worked with, then they found me on Twitter and then we kind of just become friends from there. But yeah, I personally, again, I want to kind of couch this. I know not every editor likes this, but personally, I do really like when folks reach out and they're like, by the way, this place that you suggested accepted, or just little stuff like that is really cool, because it is I guess that's another, not something I wrote down, but that's another thing, an important thing to remember, is editors are writers too, and editors are people. And I know that it's kind of obvious, but at the same time it bears repeating, because it can be easy to just kind of see the monolith of the thing they're submitting to and just kind of see that name and not necessarily make the connection that like, yeah, this is just like, I don't really think of what I do as some kind of like big and lofty thing. I'm very proud of the work that I do, and it's very gratifying. But at the end of the day, I'm just really passionate about words and stories. And so I just want to kind of do that in my life.
right.
Cool, but
Right.
that is a good thing, because we are sort of told, like, even if somebody writes you a really great letter, I love this piece, it's not right for me right now. It's like, oh, I can't, I shouldn't write them or they'll blackball me.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
I would personally, I would never, like, I don't really blacklist people in general, except like I've had some people, that can kind of get harassing in correspondence and stuff. But yeah, somebody's just writing to me and like thanking me or kind of like talking about a previous submission. Yeah, I'm totally cool with that. I love that.
Excellent.
So you heard it
All right.
now, and now you're going to get everybody who sends, you're going to get everybody.
They're
Hey,
gonna get a million things. Do you have your tips listed there as a list?
I wrote them
Or
by hand, but I could always
No,
type
I
them
just
out
wondered
as
if we could, before we just finish this, if you would just say them all, just
Yeah.
like without it, going into, just so we have them as a
Yeah,
list.
so the first one is the Hydra. This is just the order I wrote them in. The first one is the Hydra method, what I call the Hydra method. So if you feel like a piece is ready to go, and you just kind of need to play the numbers game with it, when you get one rejection, send it to 3 other magazines. That's one tip. My second one would be to read mags and become a fan before you're a submitter. And just kind of, especially when you're going to be submitting to a specific magazine, try to read and understand what they look for, the kind of work that they publish. And look at it less as something where you're just kind of trying to check off a list, and more to just explore and discover this new magazine. Another tip I've got is to follow bios, and what I said is to kind of leapfrog from magazine to magazine. So if you find a writer that you click with their work, just kind of look at their bio, look where they've ended up before, and read more of their work at these magazines. Let that kind of springboard you into just wider readership. And then the fourth is when you're writing, specifically, try to answer, at least for yourself, why this story, why are you telling it, and why are you telling it right now? That was just something that one of my screenwriting professors, I always have that in my ear when I'm writing something, and I think it. And then my final one came from a different professor that I had. Write to express, not impress. Really, experimentation is awesome, but I think it needs to be in service to character and story. And so try to find that balance. So those would be the 5 tips that I've got for reading,
Excellent.
writing, submitting Flash.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all your tips. I'm going to follow some that I don't already. And now we always end with the best thing we learned this week.
Okay.
Do I go first? I always go first.
I know.
So actually, the first novel I wrote, Dirk Quigley's Guide to the Afterlife, All You Need to Know to Choose the Right Heaven, is about this guy who discovers different afterlives. But one of his ideas, this is my sci-fi idea that turned true, is that he says, when you're dead, you could turn, because people have carbon, and anything with carbon, if it's subjected to extreme pressure, can turn into a diamond. So you can turn your relatives, your dead relatives. It'd be good to have a big family. You wouldn't be just proposing with your aunt's ring. You'd actually be proposing with your aunt, right? And so this then happened a few years after I wrote the book. I found out that people were being turned into diamonds. So that's just an intro to the fact that I think in certain planets like Saturn, the pressure is so intense on that planet that it can actually rain diamonds because the carbon is under this pressure. So that's my fact.
And now they're planning a trip there. The very people who are going to write Nick and say, Nick, thank you so much. And by the way, we're heading to get diamonds
to Saturn to get some diamonds.
I actually saw there was a glass blower who would take ash from a loved one, and put it into a globe. And it was like this interesting little spiral that it would be.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, if you're going to keep ashes.
Or you could make an ink tattoo, like get tattooed with the ash.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's a little. Wait, you know what? There is a science fiction story in that for sure,
Right.
horror story. Yeah, really. I'm thinking. So my one of the week was that there is an Australian ornithologist or ornithology organization that fitted a bunch of magpies with some electronic. You've heard this, Elizabeth, obviously. She's like, oh, yes. And what they found was that these magpies have what they call rescue behavior or altruism, where they had these metal, they said they were trackers, but then the birds looked at them like metal parasites because, for some reason they could read the bird's thoughts. But the birds figured out very quickly how to remove them from one another because they're so smart. They took them apart and they took them off because they did not belong there. And, corvids are very smart.
Right.
They are corvids,
I
aren't
love
they?
that. I was like scientist 0, magpies 12.
Exactly. So I thought that was cool.
That's cool.
Nick, you have something?
This was one that I had read about a while ago, but I totally forgot about, and then it came up on this list. That during the world's first nuclear meltdown in 1952, future president Jimmy Carter actually lowered himself into the reactor and saved Ottawa, the capital of Canada. And he absorbed, Carter and his team absorbed a year's worth of radiation in each of the 90-second shifts that they took to basically save this reactor. They apparently exposed themselves to 1,000 times the level of radiation considered safe by today's standards. And basically without their efforts, this could have been a massive catastrophe.
I've never even heard of that one.
Right.
So isn't that weird? And Carter, wow, Carter really is a national treasure on so many levels. What a man. What a man.
Wow.
So, but he was in Canada? What was his, how did he end up? Did you get that far into the story to know how he ended up there?
He was in the military at that point. I'm trying to see, I don't know exactly he was a US naval officer. There we go. And so he was put in charge of trying to contain that disaster. And so they brought him over to Ottawa for it.
Wow, I'm going to have to read up on that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Wow.
He's an amazing. Every time you read something about him, it's just like, wow.
Right.
What a great man. What a great man.
What a great man.
So, well, thank you again, Nick. This has been lovely speaking to you.
Yeah,
Really, really
thanks.
wonderful.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And everybody, don't forget to get Afterglow.
Yeah. And then we want to thank, Elizabeth has someone to
Oh,
thank. I
yes,
know.
and we want to, of course, thank our wonderful producer, Maria Korloff, without who we couldn't do this. And
Could
also
not.
Alex Korloff for editing, and Kevin Scott for original music. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. And we, for our viewers, if you like the video, please go ahead and tell us and leave comments for us. And be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification button so you won't miss any future episodes. And if you want to support MetaStellar, you can help us create new original content by going to our Patreon page and making a donation. And all the money goes to paying the authors of original fiction. So come visit, check it out. There's links for everything below. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Nick. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.